Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Specifically About Quality. This is the podcast where we talk honestly about quality management, not as theory, but as something that has to work every single day on the shop floor, in audits, and in real organizations. I'm Agata Lewkowska, a specialist in quality management systems with a background in the automotive industry.
And I'm Christopher Scott, your co-host and an expert in quality assurance as well as operational excellence. As always, we're really glad that you're here with us today. If this podcast is helpful for you, we invite you to our podcast newsletter. For every episode, we prepare a newsletter with additional materials, free resources, and practical downloads related to the topic, and with access to all of our previous freebies from previous episodes. You can sign up directly on our website under resources or with the link provided with this podcast episode today. Expect the podcast newsletter every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central European Time.
And if you've ever tried to introduce a new procedure, a new control plan, or a new way of working and thought, why this is so hard, then today's episode is for you. Today, we'll fulfill our promise from episode 21 about how to manage revalidation and requalification. We're talking about change management, and not in a generic or corporate way. We want to talk about why quality-related changes so often fail, even when they are technically correct, compliant with standards, and designed by experienced professionals.
And this is a topic we see constantly in our consulting, audits and trainings, and I can say this as a customer, I see it happen all the time, unfortunately. The system looks good on paper, but people don't follow it, or they only follow it when an audit is coming.
Which leads to frustration on all sides. Quality managers feel ignored, production teams feel overloaded, and management wonders why improvements don't last. So today we want to unpack what is really happening. So, what change management really mean in quality, Chris?
Well, like I said, when people hear change management, they often think about HR initiatives, communication campaigns, maybe behavioral things, or maybe leadership coaching, so to get people into that level of mindset. But in quality management, change happens all the time. It's one of the constants, which sounds a bit of a paradox, even if we don't call it that.
Yes, every updated control plan actually is a change. Every revised FMEA is a change, or every new customer-specific requirement, every audit finding, which later will lead to the corrective actions, even when you are doing a new KPI or you are doing escalation. This might be connected to the change, and usually for the people closest to the process. In fact, operators, supervisors, process engineers, these are the people who feel the impact first, even if they were not involved in the decision. Chris, do you agree with this?
Yeah, I agree, Agata, and this is where we see the first big gap. Quality teams often think we've updated the document, we've trained people, so the change is implemented or it's effective. But in reality, documentation and training are only one small part of that process. I remember a tier 1 supplier where the quality department introduced a new deviation management process. From their perspective, it was a clear improvement, better traceability, better risk assessment, better order readiness. But can you see where this can go wrong, Agata?
Yes, but on the shop floor perspective, suddenly every deviation required more forms, more approvals, and more explanations.
Exactly. And nobody explained how this protected operators during orders or reduced firefighting later. So people compiled only minimally, and sometimes not at all. They wouldn't follow the process that was new as an improvement.
And then management concluded that people resist to change, if I can say such ironically, when in fact the change was never properly managed. So this is one of the first most common questions about people who are resistant to change. So let's think about this. Why do people resist change even when it clearly improves quality? And the honest answer I can find here is that most people don't resist change itself, but they resist uncertainty, extra workload, and the feeling of losing control.
Or the feeling of being blamed if something goes wrong. This is especially important in quality where mistakes are often linked to audits, customer complaints, or management reviews when you're getting the recertification of audits or the surveillance audits. I often see this with FMEA updates. After an audit, the FMEA is revised, new actions are added, new controls are defined, but the people who actually run the process are not involved. So for them, FMEA is just another document that quality updates for auditors or customers.
Exactly. And then when the same failure occurs again, management asks, why didn't the FMEA prevent this? And the answer is simple. The change never reached daily behavior. Since I've already touched on the topic of risk management in FMEA, I would like to draw your attention to the system requirements included in IATF 16909 standard, okay? First of all, we have to assess the potential impact on the introduced change, taking into account the risks. And therefore, if we are to perform this risk analysis, most often when we are talking about the production process, we're talking about FMEA, which should verify it for us in the next step. Of course, we can talk about process validation as next step resulting from risk management to obtain objective data about the change. But nevertheless, the ITF requirements are defined for the pre-series and serial phase. At this point, we need to move from the behavioral side to something very concrete, because in automotive, change management is not optional. It is explicitly required by IATF 16909. And let's look at the first clause. I mean the first because in design and development phase, okay, there is a specific clause dedicated to change management in this phase, and the standard is very clear here that every design change after initial product approval must be evaluated for impact on fit, form, function, performance, and even durability. And I want to stress something here. It says evaluated, not assumed, not believed, but evaluated with data.
Yes, and it doesn't matter whether the change is proposed by the organization or by a supplier, so by the customer or by the supplier, or by the governing body because it's driven by statutory and regulatory requirements. It's important. Companies often think that internal changes are safe because they originate inside.
Exactly, but the standard doesn't differentiate. Every change must be validated against customer requirements and approved internally before implementation. And here is where change management usually breaks down. The technical evaluation may be done. Engineering might check dimensions, but quality might review documentation. But nevertheless, nobody evaluates the human impact on the process. However, I hope while PFMEA analyzes in a GVDA approach, it is at least done because you need to take into consideration one of the 5M elements, which is man category, in fact.
Which is ironic, Agata, because the same clause requires validation before production implementation. Validation is not a paperwork exercise. It's proof that the change works in reality. So let's look at pre-series versus series, where things go wrong.
Yes, Chris, let's separate pre-series from series production. In pre-series, teams are usually more cautious. There is more testing, more attention, and more engineering involvement. But in series production, changes often feel routine, a tooling modification only, a supplier allocation, maybe not only because this is a big topic in fact, a small process adjustment.
And that's where clause 8561 becomes critical. Control of changes, so this is supplemental. The organization must have a documented process to control and react to changes that impact product realization. Not just record them, they need to control them.
Yes, and I love this part. The effects of any change must be assessed, including changes caused by the organization, the customer, or any supplier. So there are 3 different sources of these changes, yes? Not only our internal changes. We have here wider perspective. That means if your supplier moves production to another location, you cannot say they validated it. No, you must assess the impact on your product realization. Because even if this is the same product received from that supplier, please remember that completely different sources of variation may be present at new location. Chris, will you agree?
Yeah, and I agree, and I can use a perfect example, and I'm going to repeat the same example that I've used in one of our podcast episodes and webinars. I once worked with a tier 1 supplier where they moved their production facility from Romania to Morocco, and Morocco was seen to be the better location for product quality. They didn't fully assess the impact on the final customer, and that stopped their production line significantly and caused a recall campaign on their products. Again, you might think it's like for like, the training is the same, but it's not. The operators worked differently in one location versus the other. You've got the cultural differences between the different ones, Romanians versus Moroccans and so on. We have to factor all of that in during changes. So again, the process is usually neglected on the human element. I want to add that the standard does go further. It requires defined verification and validation activities. It requires a documented risk analysis. It requires retention of records. But here's the uncomfortable question. How many organizations treat change risk analysis as deeply as they treat FMEA during APQP?
Good question. In many companies, change risk analysis is a form attached to the ECN, if I can say like that, engineering change notification, it's filled in quickly, sometimes even copied from previous changes. But if we are honest here, most major quality incidents are linked to poorly controlled changes. Chris, so now let's maybe talk about production trial runs, okay? Is it a missed opportunity? How do you think?
Yes, and let's talk about the trial runs in themselves because the standard is explicit here. Changes, including those made at Supplier, should require a production trial run for verification. And this is where we see a huge gap between compliance and reality.
Yes. A production trial run is not a symbolic batch of parts. It is an opportunity to observe the process under controlled conditions and detect unintended consequences. So, for example, I worked with a company that changed a component supplier due to cost pressure, of course, which is common, yes, in automotive. The dimensional results were fine, lab testing passed, but during the production trial run, they noticed a subtle increase of assembly force. Not enough to trigger immediate rejection, but enough to increase operator fatigue and variation simply. If that had gone unnoticed, 6 months later, they would definitely have faced customer complaints due to micro cracks, I would say.
And this is exactly where the standard requires validation before implementation. Validation is not just dimensional conformity, it's process behavior under real conditions, and this is the definition of stability.
Also, for products with embedded software, the revision level of software and hardware must be documented as part of the change records. And this is critical because software changes are often invisible on the shop floor simply. But one version mismatch can create field failures months later, and the complaint will come to the plant. Yes, not for instance to the remote location which was responsible for software development, because this is, let's be honest, software requires a lot of competency, different competencies from the manufacturing plants, yes? Chris, so let's talk about the customer notifications.
Yes, Agata, another area where organizations struggle is customer notification. ITF 6949 clearly states that when required by the customer, you must notify them of a planned production realization change after the most recent production approval.
And obtain documented approval before implementation, yes? And this is not a bureaucracy. This is a protection for the customer. And in fact, this is protection for you. I've seen companies implemented minor changes without customer notification because they believed the impact was negligible. Then during the customer audit, the change was discovered and suddenly trust is damaged and new discussion or escalation is simply opened. We don't want to have it, yes?
Yes, and change management is not only about risk control, it's about relationship control. So I want to connect the standard to the behavior. If we combine everything that we've discussed, the standard is technically clear. We need to evaluate the impact, perform risk analysis, validate changes, run production trials. We also need to notify our customers, retain the records. But none of this works if people treat change as a shortcut or as a routine administrative step.
Exactly. And the real question is not whether you have a documented process for change control, as this is required by ITF, in fact. The real question is whether your organization treats change as a high-risk event every time. Because in automotive, stability is everything, and the stability is destroyed not by daily operations, but by uncontrolled changes.
Change management is risk management in motion.
Yes, you are right. This is a good statement, Chris. And that's why this topic is not soft. And I would call it's strategic.
Quality systems change management fail not because standards are wrong, but because change is poorly managed.
Yes, change management is not an extra activity. It is the way quality management becomes real, sustainable, and effective.
And the more complex your organization, the more important this becomes.
If you recognize these challenges in your organization, we invite you to visit qualitywise.pl. We support companies not only with audits and trainings, but with real implementation of change in quality systems. Whether you're introducing new core tools, reacting to audit findings, or struggling with engagement on the shop floor, we help turn compliance into daily practice.
And that's exactly why we've created Change Management in Quality, a practical workbook for making changes stick. This is a companion workbook to this podcast. Subscribe to our Qualitywise newsletter on Qualitywise website under resources or under the link provided with this episode to get it. Expect the podcast newsletter every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central European Time.
Before you go, if today's episode helped you or sparked new ideas, please give it a like, leave us a comment, and share it with your team or network. The more we share, the stronger the quality community becomes. Thank you.